Alright guys, here is the finished product. It actually makes for a really cute little tarot deck. I did do the whole thing with scissors, cut them out by hand. I tried the paper cutter and it was hard to get it quite right. But I did have a hard time cutting out the corners correctly. They looked really messy. So I did go in with this, what is it, little Fiskars corner rounder, edger, what the hell ever it is. And that cleaned it up nicely. I did start trying to edge it, but with a camera between my arms, it was really hard and I kept slipping. So I'm going to do that later on my own time. But it'll look really cute with some red edges. It's not perfect, but it's nice. It's a nice little deck. So we're going to use that as one of our comparison decks. And here are the rest of my Oswald Worth decks. This is my nice version of the 1989 deck. This is the Oswald Worth Tarot by US Games, which we have already established is not actually by Oswald Worth, just a sort of a copying of his images. This is this deck, the Golden Worth Tarot, the Gilded Major Arcana by Lo Scarabeo. And this is a copy of basically also the 1926 version of the Oswald Worth Tarot, but this is the one that came with Elizabeth Haysh's book, Tarot, or in English it's The Wisdom of the Tarot. This came with a German version of the deck, German version of the book, and it was originally just called Tarot. Anyway, the Oswald Worth Tarot illustrates that book, and apparently people say that this is a redrawing of the deck, but it looks so incredibly similar. If it is a redrawing, it's done exactly like the original, which I'm assuming is the US Games version here. So this deck, when Oswald Worth originally did it, is supposed to have gold background, probably like a gilded gold, I think. There is an edition of this deck that is unfortunately no longer available. I'll write it out down below. It's by a publisher in Canada. I can't pronounce the name. Editions Lagele, some fucking shit like that. They released like 3 separate editions of that deck, of this deck. And it's supposed to be, I think the last one was in like 2001. It's really hard to find now. It's no longer in print as far as I can tell. But it is supposed to be like the original 1926 Oswald Worth, exactly as it would have looked. So really that's the only thing that's kind of still on my wish list, is a really accurate version of the 1926 deck. Between these two, I'm pretty happy with my 1889 versions. This one looks like actually an original, you know, how the deck would have originally looked, just much smaller in size. You can tell if you get real close to it, the way it's painted. You know, he originally did like the line drawings and then the color was like sort of stenciled on there somehow, so it goes outside of the lines in a lot of places, just like you see on a lot of old Marseille decks and stuff. So this one's really well done. I'm not sure if it's been cleaned up at all. You only see that overlap of the color in a few places. It's really not bad. From what I had read, I heard it was like much worse, like it looked really messy. Anyway, this is a very faithful reproduction by Igor Barzilai. I'll put a link down below to this website also. And everything is just crisp and clean. It's really been cleaned up exactly as I'm sure he would have intended his coloring to be. And he's really maintained the same color that Oswald Worth put into his deck, because that really is an important thing. Oswald Worth spends a lot of time in here talking about color associations, and the color associations for his deck are incredibly important, and I think that's one of people's biggest pet peeves with the Oswald Worth Tarot, even though it's not really the Oswald Worth Tarot, but that the coloring can be rather different in some places. Some of the little details in the coloring that he actually talks about in his book as being important aren't necessarily included in this deck. Oh, I wonder if I can get closer. So that might be as good as we're getting here. They're sort of in size order, haha. So this is what the front cover of this deck right here, the Oswald Worth Tarot, looks like. The Igor Barzilai version came with this beautiful box. It even came wrapped in this, which I think may be what it originally looked like when it was released. How neat is that? All in French, and that's on the cover. Isn't that beautiful? This is like a treasure, such a treasure. This deck, by the way, the Oswald Worth Tarot, this is the US Games version. I no longer have the box for it, unfortunately, but I will put a link to this deck on Amazon or something down below so you guys can take a look at what the box looks like. In the little white book or somewhere on the box, I believe it actually gives credit to the publishing house or whatever. I forget the name of it, and the artist, Michael Simeon, who created this deck. It's a close copy, but it does look very, very different than either decks. It seems to be more of a copy of the 1926 version without the borders, these lovely Art Nouveau borders. We'll talk more about that in a second. It looks like woodcuts. It looks like old Marseille woodcut. It's sort of done in that style. You see all the little lines in there. So it's kind of interesting in its approach. And you can see Oswald Worth, both of his decks don't have that look, they look painted. Anyway, in the timeline, this is the first deck that he created. This is one he didn't. I'm just going to leave it in the center for now because it's the most popular. And then over here, between these two, I think we'll get a pretty good idea of what the 1926 version looked like. So this is the later version. You'll be able to see some of the changes as we go through that he made from the first deck to basically his second deck. And you can see a big change that was made here. There's his finger. This is very classic Worth stance. One finger for the magician anyway, with one finger or one hand touching a coin and the other one holding the double-ended wand. One side is red, one side is blue. Let me pull this up so you can see a little bit better. See that? One side red, one side blue, one hand on the coin. And the same thing you get in the older deck here. However, there are two other coins on the table there that you don't see. So it's just something he changed in the later deck. The red flower, the red tulip growing at the feet of the magician here is a theme carried through several cards in the major arcana. You'll see this flower in different states of bloom. And you'll see that in a lot of other decks, Worth influenced decks. Some of my favorite decks, by the way, are heavily influenced by Worth. The Masonic Tarot, incredibly Worth inspired. Tavaglione's Stairs of Gold deck, also incredibly Worth and Papus influenced. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. And there's lots of other decks out there that really are just heavily influenced by Worth. It's really interesting how in this deck, actually, the Golden Tarot of Worth, you get that 3D effect that people have talked about when you look at this deck with the gold metallic background. I don't think it was sparkly like this, but it actually gives you the same effect. It's a very 3D effect that's created when you do the cards like this. Between the border and the gold, it really makes everything pop. It's quite beautiful. The other thing you can see here is this is certainly not drawn to scale. This card is actually the exact size of the cards as when they were released. The only thing that's missing is a thicker border. They had a thick border when they were released, and I opted not to get that version of the cards because this was a little bit cheaper. But I think you can pretty much tell, yeah, it would have been sort of the size of this when it was actually released, because it had that thick border. And then this guy, I'm going to assume that the 1926 deck was the same size and had borders like that too. This looks pretty to scale. This one, they did blow up the images to the size it would have been with the borders. That's actually pretty much the same size. So I don't mind that. I don't mind not having a bigger border and having a bigger image. I think that's fantastic. Anyway, like I was saying before about how you can find all sorts of little goodies in his Art Nouveau borders here. You don't necessarily see the Phoenician or a Greek letter or a symbol in every single one. In every single card, but I feel like there's interesting things going on each one, and in a lot of them it's debatable if it's there, if it's not there, and on some of them it's super clear. But I think it's very possible that over here it looks like sort of an upside down A, which is kind of what the Phoenician is also. It's actually a sideways A. And the Greeks later flipped it and stuff. It's a very interesting evolution, the Phoenician to Hebrew and Greek and all these things. But I also feel like I see a crown up at the top, which would be very appropriate too. But it's really fun to play sort of Where's Waldo, or find whatever you can in the borders. Everything is done on purpose, you know. All right, but there's your magicians. All right, on to our High Priestess. Now, this is something I always thought was so interesting. In the older deck, his first deck, the papus, and the Fool, both have, you can really see it in this deck, have dark colored skin, and it's been theorized that this is really because of their associations with certain constellations. What is it? Cephas and Cassiopeia. And there's strong ties with those two constellations, like it's them as the king and queen of Ethiopia. There's this whole story there. So some have theorized that that's why their skin is so dark. You can see in the later deck it doesn't sort of follow through. The Fool and the Papus are both, colored, have the same skin color as the rest of the deck anyway. But you definitely see that here with the Fool and the papus, and I will show you when we get to the Fool. It's just as darkly colored. He's just as darkly colored. So you can see how this deck really is totally based on the 1926 version, just kind of without the borders pretty much. You see the Sphinx beneath her robes. You see the yin yang. Both of those things you do not see in his first deck. But there's lots of other things here that have become like classic Worth things. It's the first time you really see that. This checkerboard floor, the Priestess holding two keys. In some really old tarot decks, what is it? I think the Parisian Tarot and the Geoffroy, the Caitlin Geoffroy, the Priestess is actually holding like one giant key. So it's really interesting to see the key thing going on here. I like how they're much bigger in the older deck too. It reminds me of those two decks. So you can see they've pulled, Stan and Ozzy have pulled from all sorts of different sources and old decks. I think he's cleared up some things in the later deck here too. The red pillar and the blue pillar are much more clear. This is red and sort of a brownish pillar. I like that he went with the red and the blue, and he talks about that in the book. But the fact that you have a yin-yang on these cards is it's really friggin' cool. He pulls in these Eastern philosophies and Eastern ideas and ties them all in with the tarot. We're sort of so used to seeing that sort of thing now, but this was the first time it was really ever done. One of the other things actually you don't get with this deck, by the way, the Michael Simeon, I'm going to call it, version, is the signature, the Oswald Worth signature. He signed every single one of his cards in the 1926 version, not in the 1889 version. But you'll see his OW somewhere on every single one of the cards, and that's not in this deck. And as for the Art Nouveau borders, one of the things that you can very, very easily see is a Phoenician Beth, basically, right up there. All these symbols are really interesting to play around with, what they might mean too. I have fun with that. Okay, moving on. And here are all your beautiful starry-crowned empresses. Oh, so beautiful. There are 9 stars around her head. They've carried through the Marseille symbolism of the eagle, and it's looking to the right, where the emperor eagle looks to the left. this empress with her foot on the crescent moon. It used to be upturned crescent in the 89, and then later it becomes sort of a downturned stool for her to rest her foot on. But you really don't see that in a lot of other empress cards. That foot on the crescent moon, so interesting. He also changed, it looks like, her scepter that bears a cross on the end. Used to have a fleur-de-lis, a flower of life on the end. That's something you see in a lot of old tarot decks too, one or the other. You see both of them. And I do feel like I see maybe sort of a backwards gemelle up in the corner here. That could very well be. But she is a beautiful winged empress also. All right, our emperor, number 4, changed, like in the Priestess, sort of changed the orientation of things just a little bit. He's even more in profile in the later deck, here in his revision of the deck. Definitely changed the way the eagle looks too. It looks to have a leer in the center here. It's so wonderful, I think, to have both of these decks, so you can, it just draws your eye to different symbolism, things that you might not have noticed in one or the other. I'm so grateful to be able to look at both. You know, these symbols on his chest, the sun and the moon, I barely noticed in that version of the deck. And then in the Art Nouveau borders for the Emperor in the 1926 version, oh, what's that? That's basically more or less a Phoenician daleth. It looks very much like a Greek delta, which works perfectly too. Here also you see continued that slightly more in bloom red tulip or flower. And here is our Pope, number 5. Again, you see just sort of slight differences in the orientation, in the way his hands are, how much of the back of his hand you see there and don't see here. But most of the symbolism has really kind of remained the same here. You still get the 2 pillars behind him. His hands still have the crosses. He definitely has the 3-tiered staff here, which he talks about in the book too. Could represent the 7 planets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and control over them. They're both just really very, very classic Marseille-looking popes. You can see really just the amount of detail, too, that was added. Like, look at how simple those figures look down there. You can barely tell that they're people. And in this one, he's just given them more detail and more life. Oh, also in the borders here, you very clearly have a Phoenician. Hey, there it is. And here's all your lover cards. Very clearly in the borders here, by the way, you get 2 Phoenician vows or vows, that Y symbol, and he really goes there beautifully with the symbolism on the floor here. It creates that Y shape, that Pythagorean idea of the Y he talks about in the book, and the difference between the old and the new really isn't anything huge, huh? Some of the colors have been inverted for the lovely maiden on the right here. And, I actually never noticed that before. Cupid is blindfolded in this one, and not in that one. And here's our chariot, which the image infamously comes right from Eliphas Levi. He drew out a chariot image looking very, very similar to this, with the starry canopy and the sphinxes and the coloring and the way it's oriented. Absolutely beautiful. And then in the borders here, you have Zane, right in the corners there, right on both sides. Phoenician Zane, anyway. Zane. All these Hebrew correspondences, by the way, are exactly as they are given by Eliphas Levi. And here's Justice in all her glory. Very similar. I love how in a lot of cards, actually, the hair length has gone from really long, like you'll see in the Hermit in a second too. He's got this crazy long beard, and Justice with her long hair. It's like it's been cropped short in every picture for the 26 deck. So there's very little like Art Nouveau border that's actually visible on the Justice card, just that little bit at the top, and it doesn't really look like Heth has been included here anywhere. However, this is another one of those cards, just like the Magician, where it very clearly makes that shape anywhere, in several places on the card. All right, moving along. Here is our Hermit. See what I was saying before about the crazy long hair? Look at that. His beard's like down to his kneecaps. It could still be, but it doesn't give you that impression. If it is, it's hidden behind the robe there. But this is some really classic Worthy goodness right here too. The fact that we have this bamboo-looking staff separated into different parts. So the staff, and then also this little snaky guy right at the foot of the Hermit is a classic Worth thing that you see repeated in lots of decks afterwards. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I had to grab a couple of my decks that are kind of more heavily Worth inspired. And you can see this is the Masonic Tarot. He even has the knobby sort of walking stick with it's a many-headed serpent in front of his path here. And then this is Stairs of Gold. They've added, you see all that? They've added many more segments to his bamboo staff, but associated them with the signs of the zodiac, and then you still have the serpent at the foot of the Hermit. It's almost this prudence idea. Remember we were talking a few videos ago, I guess, about how certain decks represent the world more as the virtue prudence. And I think, personally, I think adding... especially adding the serpent at the foot here really corresponds to the Hermit with that prudence virtue here too. And right at the top, right in the center there, you have a Phoenician Teth. Cool, right? Oh. All right, on to the Wheel of Fortune here. I love Worth's Wheel of Fortune. I think it is so gorgeous. I love the intertwining snakes coiling up and riding on this crescent moon boat. So beautiful. And it looks super Marseille. So there are definitely some minor changes. The colors of the dots on the inner wheel here, you don't really have that. Instead, you get an outer circle in red, an inner circle in blue. You get all the classic symbolism around the world. So good. Around the wheel. Oh, also you get Phoenician yod, basically. It's kind of stylized Phoenician yod right there on the left. Actually, you also even get the 3 alchemical symbols that aren't on the later edition of the card. You have mercury, sulfur, and a cube for salt there, I would assume. That's gorgeous. I like the little symbols floating above them. I think that's great. Here we go. La Force. La Force. Number 11. This one always jumped out at me in the Art Nouveau borders. In the right-hand corner, the upper right-hand corner, you have very clearly a Phoenician cuff. Beautiful. I love how terrifying the lion looks in all the strength images. It's like giant and beastly. You can see how really, really different the one non-Worth deck that we're looking at, how different the lion looks. He's got very, very curly hair, and it looks more like a tufty mane in the actual Worth decks. How different her hair is and everything, too. I did lose the red beady eye from the 89 deck into the 1926 deck. He doesn't have a red beady evil eye anymore, the lion. But other than that, they are really very similar cards still. Oh, you get a lot of good classic Worth stuff coming across in the Hanged Man here too. This is something actually that gets totally lost in the recreation of this deck here. The tree is just totally green, and according to Worth, it is supposed to go from a blue into a green. That you see that color melting into itself on his decks, or at least faithful reproductions of his decks. The coins falling out in, what is it, 6 on each side. That's a unique Worth thing. And this very famous sort of lunar outfit. Oh, I just love. So classic. And the coins from the red and the blue bag are silver and gold. And I don't really see the Phoenician lamed anyway up in the borders here. It could be sort of hidden in there. Let me know what you think. La pendu, goodbye. And on to the death card. He did name the death card, name and number, and left, you know, the regular, his normal labeling for everything with the death card. And then if you look up at the top here, it's not named anymore. It's no longer called La Mort. La Mort or L'amour? Whatever. Or death. But it is still numbered, and you do still have the Hebrew correspondence of Mem right up there at the top. Isn't that gorgeous? And then there is, I love this card. And this is the 1889 version. Skeleton head. A little bit. He's like kind of smiling in that one, frowning in this one. In his later deck, the 1926 version here, you can see all the hands doing specific mudras, and then you actually don't have that. That was added in later. They're all just reaching up. Their hands sort of flayed apart, fingers flayed. And then you have the two people still, one crowned, one uncrowned. One could be male, one could be female. Oh, you do still get the mem in the border here, though, too, right there. Phoenician mem. Right. Here is our beautiful temperance cards. Here again in this card, you have that red tulip in the background of all the cards. And right on her forehead, in every one, you have this really cool little solar, solar symbol, really. And then Worth, especially in the later 1926 deck, it looks like made it very, very clear that one of the urns is silver and one is gold. And that is just so symbolic, so beautiful. And up in the right-hand corner here, actually, the right there is your Phoenician Nun. Nun. Temperance. You also actually even get the Aquarius symbol right up over here with which this temperance card is associated with. There's all sorts of really cool symbolism in the borders of these cards. So cool. And here is one of the things that the Worth Tarot is most famous for, which is including this Eliphas Levi stylized Baphomet as the devil. Tons and tons of tarot decks followed suit after this. And made their devils more Baphomet, goat stylized. If you go back and take a look at Levi's original sort of Baphomet painting or drawing thing, you'll see it's not exactly the same thing, but it does retain a lot of the same look and a lot of the same symbolism. The bat wings, the horns, the pentagram. You actually don't have that white pentagram on the forehead like you do in the other decks in the original 1889 version. You do get a slightly more stylized mercurial symbol here, though. That's really beautiful. Look at how different the two symbols look. I mean, it's the same symbol, but in the 89, it looks like horns. Can you see it twisting their way up? And there, it's a little bit more normal looking. You also get the reptilian into the furry legs here. It's just sort of furry legs. You get the breasts, you get the masculine, you get the feminine, and then you still have that old Marseille kind of thing with the two beasts or the two people or whatever sort of bound to the devil. Just like in Levi's image too, you have the Salve et Coagula. It's a powerful, powerful image. It's a shame that it's become so associated with some crazy ideas and some evil ideas, and it really isn't. It's just a Baphomet. It's all good. It's all good. This is a symbol of male and female, the Hindu symbol of the two sexes combined. And then, of course, you get the Phoenician Samek in the corner over here on the right-hand side. And then this always jumped out at me. I feel like there's an S over here and there's C's over here, Salve and Coagula. But I may just be reading too much into it. Let me just give you a close-up of the 89 version. Just a little bit more simplistic. He just really fleshed everything out with his later rendition of the deck. So I always thought this was really interesting too. I'm not going to try and pronounce any of these in French. Basically, here you have the Tower, or the House of God as the Tower card, and over here you have the Fire from Heaven as the name of your tarot card, of your Tower card. See the two differences there? And, you know, they look very similar. It's said that you can see Ayin in the shape of the falling man, too. And in Marseille decks, too. That was the Tower, and that brings us to the Star. Oh, the beautiful star. The red rose and the butterfly on the Star card. Classic Worth firsts. And specifically on the borders of the cards, I feel like there's actual pays sort of everywhere, really. Stylized ones. But you get the same thing that you had in the Temperance card in all of these. I'll show you a close-up of this guy. Actually, the two urns don't look very differentiated, but they are definitely supposed to be. See, that one should really be silver, and one should be gold. Much more clear to see in this deck. Right? So look at that. There's the red rose with the butterfly. I don't mind not seeing a bird in this card when you have a beautiful butterfly. And here's all your moon cards. You get a dark black wolf and a white dog. I actually really like the way his lobster, crayfish, whatever used to look in the 89 deck. He's really cool looking. And you get that eclipse still too. Very clearly get an eclipse here. Right? It's just like more detailed in the 89 actually. That's weird. That's the two side by side. It actually looks like an old stylized Saudi letter there. Adding the path, I think Worth was actually the first to do that. The path you see heading between the two towers, it's always sort of implied in a lot of previous decks, but never actually shown. I feel like it could be mistaken. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong, if there is another deck that came before this that actually has a clear path like Worth does here. Here is your Sun cards, and oh, I just love this. In the Art Nouveau borders on both sides, you have a Phoenician coif, right? Which I love because it looks very, very much like a Greek phi. So good. And I just really enjoy his depictions of the people in the Sun card. One male, one female, one in red, one in blue. 1 foot inside the inner circle, 1 foot in the outer circle here. I like that he added the flowers to this sort of grassy knoll garden looking thing here. And moving on to Judgment. The Worth deck is really cool. I think they're, you know, the one person is just rising from the grave here and the other two are sort of onlookers. And just like with Temperance, you have a beautiful sort of solar symbol right on the forehead of the angel as he sounds the trumpet. Oh, I almost forgot the Judgment card. Resh. Resh is in the lower right-hand corner, right there. Phoenician Resh. And here is our world cards. This is one of the ones that I think was actually based on Levi's image. He just changed things around a little bit. He talks in his book about why he has both wands in one hand, as opposed to Levi's image and other images that of the world card where she has like a wand in both hands or a baton in both hands. But it's still a very classic world card. I feel like you can even see the way the bull looks very similar to Levi's and and all that jazz. And then if you look closely at the borders here, this is another one of those cards where there's not a lot of Art Nouveau border to look at. However, this cross actually right there is a Phoenician Tau. So Tav. So I don't know. I like to look at that. It's there somewhere. All right, on to our last card. I left him for last in honor of Oswald Worth. Here is our Fool card. One of the things in a Worth deck is you have a lynx. A lynx is what's biting him. You have, the first time I know I ever saw an alligator on a Fool card. Apparently it's not the very first instance of a crocodile appearing on a Fool tarot card. The very first was early 1800s. The tarot gebelin, I believe it's called, actually has a crocodile on it, but this comes directly from Paul Christian, who wrote about that Egyptian tarot, and even called the Fool card the crocodile, right? I forget when his book came out. What is it? 1860, 1870, something like that. So it's not long before Worth and Stan, Ozzy and Stan, created this deck. But it is really one of the first examples. This is, I guess, what is it really? It might be the second time a crocodile actually appears on a Fool card. I don't know. I think that's so fascinating. So lots of Worth-inspired decks. You'll see like a lynx or a cat-like beast attacking the Fool there, and you'll see an alligator or a crocodile in the background. You very clearly get the letter Shin in the background right there in the upper right-hand corner of the borders. And if you've ever heard people talk about how it looks like the Fool is wearing a mask, I feel like that whole thing sort of comes from this deck. By the way, here's where you see that dark skin color again on the Fool, just like you saw in the papus, in the Priestess. You see, and it's not all the people. There's a very distinct dark coloring to those two faces. So that's really cool. I always thought that was really neat. And you see that red tulip here again, in a very different state. In the old deck, it's even sort of yellowed out. You also get some stylized shins, maybe over here and over here. It plays with the shape quite a bit. So that was all the Oswald Worth tarots that I could get my hands on. Love the guy, love the book, love the decks. If you guys have any more questions about Worth, what he talks about, what's in his decks, I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but feel free to ask. I'm no expert. I just love this shit. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you real soon. Bye.